The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Dunlop, and we're ready for the next session for the POS-PixelPoint training. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. I'm just going to just double check here. I'm just going to reset to make sure that you got access to my screen. So there should be a little flicker, and then everything should be okay. And there we go. If there is not, please submit into a question form, and Leslie will pick that up, and she'll let me know that some people are having a problem with that. Otherwise, I think we're ready to go. So this is session 4 of 12 weeks. Now, in the first 3 sessions, we've covered off the basic concepts of the system, and also within that as well, we covered through all of the general operations that are available within the front end of the POS system. And then we just did a quick little introduction into the contents of the back office last time, and got some idea in terms of the different things that are available within here, how they're laid out, and so on. So what we're going to do now is actually pick up where we left off. Within this, I covered over going from the right to the left, we covered over as far as the administrator pull-down menu, and I did actually start into a few things here. Now, what I'm going to do is just kind of flip on through, relatively briefly in terms of some of the things we've quickly covered within here, because this is all the technical end of it. If you're a salesperson who's looking at this, it's a good thing to just kind of let your brain kind of step back one notch and just kind of absorb it in terms of the different functions that are available in there and where they're located. You don't necessarily need to know every bell and whistle and field that happens to be in there. If you are an installer or a support tech, then by all means pay good attention from this point on, because this is where all of the real nitty-gritty of the programming takes place, and I'll be walking through all of the different things within here. So first of all, I'm going to jump us back into system setup, and let's just take a really quick look at what we've got here. I've covered off several of the different tabs, and then we are ready to carry on across, but what I want to do is just kind of briefly reiterate some of the key things that we've got up to this point. Now, within the first tab we have here is system. All of this is basically high-end stuff that applies to the overall operation of the system, how the end of days run, and so on like that. These little checkboxes down here are very powerful because they open up the interface between PixelPoint and these respective applications as well. So you always want to make sure that you pay close attention to that. Coming over to the next one we have is taxes. Taxes are a very important thing to get right. The reason being is that if you get it wrong, and for any reason a restaurant is not charging taxes appropriately, if they're ever audited, this could come back on you, and you really don't want that to happen. So that being the case, make sure that when it comes to applying taxes to any given site, make sure that you are well acquainted with the local tax laws of that area, and work with them, to make sure that everything is copacetic that way as well. But that being said, then you've got the proper descriptions put in, the proper tax rates, and if there are any funky tax laws as well, I should point out that the way we handle those weird tax laws is through the use of a DLL. That's a dynamic link library file. You'll find within the Pixel POS folder, there's actually a subfolder in there called DLLs, and in that you would put in all of the like a regional DLL that would apply to the tax laws of that given state or province or country. And then you would modify a file called pixel32.ini. INI is a configuration file. That's also located within the Pixel POS folder. And in there you change the line that pertains to the taxes on that. Now, all this information is available within the MyPart website pertaining to modification of taxes and so on. So I'll refer to that, but I'm just kind of giving you the brief overview of the process to do that. Having done that, then what it will do is it will not only take the taxes that you've applied within here, but it will also incorporate all of those different circumstances so that if it's above or below X number of dollars, then it'll do this, that, and the other thing. Now, this is not required across the board for a lot of places. Like we have one for California, we have one for Ohio, we have one for Ontario, we have one for the Philippines, one for France, and so on like that. So there's different ones that are out there pertaining to different regions. And if for any reason our taxation does not properly apply to any given region you're working on, contact PAR support and identify what it is. Now, you may also need to provide some taxation documentation, some government documentation identifying, yes, this is the way we require it here. If the system doesn't do that, then they are obligated to do something to help you out to try and get the taxes working right for that given region. Down below that, we have these common unit. This is for clients who may be in countries that do rounding of their dollars. For example, the country of Australia does not use cents. It rounds up to the nearest nickel. So if that is the case, you can program in things like that. The company info information is for one reason used for reporting purposes, just to identify this particular establishment, but also it is used for providing address information for things such as warehouses, if you're working with multiple warehouses, some of which may be off-site, and also if you're using it for delivery drivers as well. It will use this information for the mapping system, and this will be the anchor point. And then from here, all of your deliveries will be from this point outward. All right, the next one over is POS reports. Now within POS reports, we have three areas that are within here. The first one is cash out reports. So this is the employee cash out. At the end of the shift, they run their cash out report. This is the report that is generated. It's an RPT file. If I select on the little drop-down box, and it keeps taking me to the wrong folder, here, let me go down to the Pixel POS folder. And within here, we have somewhere within here we go. Pixel reports. This is the folder that you want to refer to, the subfolder within the Pixel POS folder. And here we have all of the RPT files. Now an RPT file is basically a Crystal Reports file, and everything pertaining to back office and front end that would be generated through either Report Viewer or through the software would be located within this folder here. One thing I want to point out as well is that there is a built-in filter that's on this, which is SQLPOS and then the name of the report. Just a little reminder here that if the name of the report begins with SQLPOS, then it's a 40-column narrow carriage receipt printer front-end report. If it just begins with SQL and then the name of the report, then it's an 8.5 by 11, 80-column back office report. Okay, that's how we differentiate the two between there. But anyway, if you need to make a change to the conventional cash out report that is being provided, then you can select on anything here, and if you want to add in additional ones, just hold down the control key on your keyboard and click on the desired reports. They will all show up within here, and when you click on open, then they will all be applied within this line right here. Coming down below that, we also have the end-of-day report that is generated. This is the SQL POS end-of-day report. This is a really great report. Just make sure you've got that handy there. But again, if you need to add in any additional reports as well, then you can click on Add Report, and they will tack on to the end of that as well. And then, if you recall, within the front end, we went into Manager Sales Functions, and there was actually some front-end reports that were available within there. And within this, you can also add in additional ones if you wish within here. Just make sure that you've got Crystal Reports version 11 or compatible to be able to do this. All right, now I think roughly we ended off around here. If not this one, it was the next tab, and that's preset reports. So I'll just briefly go through this one. It's pretty straightforward. Within here, we have all of these quick close buttons here. I know that we did cover this as well. And when you're closing off a transaction, if the customer gave you like a $50 bill or a $100 bill, then you can actually just settle it really quickly using a one-punch button like this. Now, if they gave you like $150 with a $100 bill and a $50 bill, you would not use necessarily this for that. Its purpose is really just to offer a quick closing using a single button like that, and then from there it'll tell you what your change is and so on. This little checkbox up here will close it to cash. It will assume that the button you select below, being the preset payment button, is being closed to cash. If you work with an establishment that works with multiple currencies, such as, let's say, the euro and sterling, for example, then you may want to uncheck that. This way, if they give you 100 euro or 100 pounds, then you are able to differentiate one from the other. You select on the 100, and then off to the right, where they've got all the different methods of payment, that's where you would choose whether it's sterling or euro. Coming to the right of that, we also have allow pay-ins and payouts. Pretty self-explanatory. If you have this checked, then the pay-in and payout function buttons will appear within the Your Settings screen, allowing your staff to perform pay-ins and payouts. If you want to remove that capability, just uncheck that button. And then down below that, we have tender balancing, which I touched on as well. This is the process of where you go into your till or your server banking receptacle, whatever it happens to be. And from here, you count out as far as what you've got for cash, what you've got for Visa, for MasterCard, for whatever that you're taking for methods of payment, all of your tenders. And then from there, you punch in those numbers into the system, and it will calculate whether you're over or short on any one of those particular methods of payment, and identify that within your cash out report. Now this can be performed either as part of the employee cash out process if you have it checked on this, which is it's set to this by default. Then if you do activate tender balancing, I'll show you how to do that later on in this session, then those methods of payment will show up on a whole separate screen as part of your cash out process. If you selected on balance on end of day, then actually there will be a tender balance button that shows up within the sales function of your sales manager, sales functions, and then you'll see a tender balance button in there. In which case then the manager who is performing the end of day process can actually perform a tender balance for the overall establishment. So you have your choice of either one. Okay. Coming over to orders now. Orders is divided off into 3 general sections. The first one we have here is future orders. This is where you go about programming how future orders will work on the system. If you do not program any of this, then there will be no future order capability. Now, a future order is basically where a member of some kind, it can be a reservation, a takeout order, a delivery order, whatever it happens to be, can actually apply within the system to say, I want to have this order delivered or picked up on a certain time, or maybe even within a certain date as well. And within here, this is where you go about programming that. If you walk through each one of these. Now, the first one, it says here, orders will be processed this number of minutes before the scheduled time. So what this means is that when you place an order, let's say we want it for 6 o'clock tonight, okay, and I'll come in and pick up my order of fish and chips. Then the order will be processed or print in the kitchen 15 minutes before that time. Okay, so the member Scott calls up, I want to place an order for pickup. It'll be an order of fish and chips, and I want it for 6 o'clock tonight. Then at 5:45, quarter to 6, the order will actually be printed in the kitchen. And at that time, they'll go about making it. It'll be hot and fresh and ready to go for 6 o'clock. Order must be scheduled at least this many hours into the future. Now, I've got a 1 in here. So, for example, you don't want to use a future order for something where the guy says, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. So, if that is the case, then you can put in a minimum time for that, a minimum allowable time for it. Order can be scheduled no more than this many hours into the future. Now, if this field is set to 0, then that means that this whole functionality will be disabled. There will be no future order capability on the system. Now, you can set this to any maximum length of time you want to allow for this. If I only want to allow, let's say, for orders that can be processed within the current day, then I may want to put in like 8 or 12 hours or something like that. But you can go way beyond that as well. As you see within here, I've got 9,999 hours, which means you can now program future orders for future days as well. So it could be for tomorrow or for Friday, for example. And the system will actually be intuitive enough to allow for that as well. If you do have a program for that, these open checks, okay, so it's a future order, but it's also an open check, and the system will not interfere with the end-of-day process. PixelPoint is intuitive enough to understand that if it's set as a future order, then don't let it halt the processing of the end-of-day, where you normally have to have, all checks are closed, everyone's cashed out, clocked out, and so on. And if you've got a future order in there for Friday at 6 o'clock, yes, that check is open, but because it's flagged as future order, it will not interfere with that end-of-day process. Now, if the check is settled within the current day, then the funds for that check will be within the current day, but the inventory depletion and the actual recording of the sale itself, in terms of products and so on, will not occur until that particular date has come and gone, in which case then the customers picked up their goods. All right, coming down below that, we have auto gratuity. Now, auto gratuity is basically programming the system where, based on certain criteria, you can have an automatic gratuity charged to a check. And so this is how it works. First of all, the first thing we have here is auto gratuity charge. 15 equals 15%, for example, just as an example. So whatever your gratuity would be for this that you want to apply, you just pop in the number in there, and that will be the percentage based on the check. That's the way we do it within auto gratuity. There's not a flat rate using this form of calculation here. Now, there are two criteria for this that the system is going to look to. The first one is when the number of customers is greater than or equal to whatever it happens to be. And it will look to that, but also look to when the amount of the check is greater than or equal to whatever it happens to be. Now, take a look at how I program this right now. The first one, when the number of customers is greater than or equal to. Now, if you leave that blank, it's going to assume 0, which means as long as you got a customer on there, it's going to charge the gratuity. If you want, you can put in, okay, I need at least 5 customers before I'm going to charge you the auto gratuity on it. So you want to put a 5 in there. If it really doesn't matter to the establishment in terms of how many customers, but it does matter to them in terms of the amount of the check, then you can program it to something like this here, where I put in a value that will never be attained. Okay, there will never be 9,999 customers seated at one table, and but it will actually exceed the amount of $200. So if that is the case, then this will only look to $200. But you can reverse this logic as well. You know, if I got 5 or more customers and I don't care about the amount of the check, then you can put in a really large amount for the amount of the check. So you can work either way. Or if it can be, you know, if there's more than 5 customers or more than $200 on the check, then apply the gratuity. You can program it that way as well. Coming over to the right-hand side, we also have calculate gratuity. Now this has to do, again, with your local tax laws, before taxes or after taxes. So if taxes are going to be incorporated into that particular calculation, then you may want to identify whether it would be before or after taxes on that. The next thing here is enforce gratuity amount when closing check. Now on this, because there's a couple of ways that this can be handled on here. I, for example, am going into the check and I'm ordering things, and as soon as I've passed $200, then it's going to bang kick on the 15% gratuity. But if I want, because there may be other things such as coupons and discounts and so on like that that may be applied as well, I may want to check on enforce the gratuity amount when closing the check, in which case then it will wait until the final closing of the check, and whatever the bottom line total is on it, that's what it will calculate on at that time. Also, allow coupon to lower gratuity as well. Now, by selecting on this, then if there is, you know, like I've got a 2-for-1 coupon or something like that, then that may also need to affect in terms of the calculation of that 15% gratuity as well. So do you want to incorporate coupons into that or not? Okay. Also, let me back up on one more thing. As far as the enforcing of the gratuity, I should point this out. When you leave this unchecked, and in most cases you're going to leave this unchecked, what's going to happen here is that the gratuity will be calculated as a suggested gratuity. Okay, will not be forced. And for a lot of places, at least in North America, this is the way it works, is that I can print off the check. Here's what the total is. Here's what the total would be if you were nice enough to put on 15%. And so that's showed on there, but it does not force that. The enforced gratuity amount, what this will do when you select on this as well, is that it will actually force the bottom line total that I was referring to earlier to include that gratuity. So you must pay that. If you do not pay the gratuity, you have not paid the entire check. This is legal in some areas. In a lot of areas within North America, this would not be applicable. All right, coming down below that, we have course prefixes. Now, PixelPoint can work with multiple courses. Okay, so I've got appetizers, main course, dessert, and if I'm ordering in that particular way as well, because it depends on the form of table service, if I do break it out by courses, then you can actually have these little prefixes show up as well. Now, the prefixes, you may recall, if I ordered like a salad, and on the order screen, it showed up with a little A next to it. If I ordered the steak dinner, it showed up with an M next to that. If I ordered the pie, it had a little D next to it. And those symbols also show up or are reflected across within the table layouts as well. So all that's available within there. But I should point out, take a look at this. If I click on this, I've got appetizer, main course, other course, and dessert. And that takes up the first few courses that are available in the system. But I actually have up to 10 courses that you can program within a PixelPoint system. So for example, some Asian restaurants, if you go and you may have like a 7-course Japanese meal or something like that. And if that is the case, you can actually break down all of those courses into PixelPoint as well and have them all properly identified and laid out that way. And if you're doing something like hold and fire within the system, this is where, you know, I've got all my appetizers and then I'm going to fire those off. The way the hold and fire process works, it works with these courses as well. There's a window that will come up with all the courses, and from there I can select on appetizer and fire them off. And so all of the appetizers will go across. And then the next time I go back in, I can say main course, fire them off. Or if you're doing a 7-course meal, course 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can shoot them off in the proper sequence that way as well. You can also skip down the list as well. So if there's like a 3rd or 4th course and you want to do 2 courses or 3 courses at the same time, just go to the bottom one that you want to send that off, and it'll scoot them on through. Or you can actually send them in different orders as well. The main course may take a long time, so I want to send that off now so that they can start working on it, and then in a couple of minutes I'll send off the appetizers, which will just take a couple of minutes to do. In any case, within any one of these, you can actually change the prefix that shows up in there. If you don't want a single A, for example, I can put in app or apps or appetizer or A1 or something like that. You can put in anything you want for that. Just bear in mind that the more you put in with that prefix, the less you'll have available for other typing that's available on the line when it prints out in the kitchen. Defaults. Now within older versions of PixelPoint, there were certain functions in here that we had a little bit of problem trying to upgrade and convert across with new functionality. One of these happened to be within split commands. Okay, split such as seat 1 of 2, seat 2 of 2, or split 1 of 2, split 2 of 2, like within pizzas, for example. It was having problems trying to bring this across to the printer in the kitchen. And so what we did is we actually tagged it to a specific type of product that we created in the system. We hard-coded it in there, and you just use this to kind of set that up so that it would treat that as a product when it printed it out. The same with the seating position, as it said, seat 1 of 2, seat 2 of 2. And so we created those and identified them within here. As far as what you need to do within here, you don't need to do anything from this point on. We're so far into the new versions now that basically any of the programming that's required within here, you can just leave it as it is. You'll never have to change any of this stuff. Coming over to the next one here, we have collaboration. Now, collaboration allows you to collaborate with, let's say, a corporate office, for example. You may recall, I'm just going to jump out of this for a moment, okay, in here. This is my back office. You'll see within here, I've got the PAR website showing up within here. And actually, it's a functional website as well. I can go into anything pertaining to the PAR website. And this all shows up within the back office. It's a legitimate web page here. Now, what you would use collaboration for is for things like where the corporation has an intranet, which is a secured networking, web-based network for a chain of stores, for example, a chain of restaurants. And what your restaurant would do is you need to tie into that. You log into it. You download documentation, manuals, and videos, and anything else you need to do, and you collaborate back and forth with other stores and with the corporate office. And you can do that all securely through the back office here. But to do that, you need to program it in first, and that's where you go over here, collaboration. You put in the URL address or the web address for wherever it is you need to go, and then within here you've got a couple of things. Auto Connect. If you have Auto Connect selected, then when you go into back office, it'll automatically connect to that URL. Okay, if you uncheck that, it will not do that. Also, you have automatic login. So if you log in to the system, if you log into it, it will actually remember the username and password that you did for that, so that when you go back into the back office, then boom, you're already logged into the intranet, and then from there you can jump in and grab off whatever it is you need to do with that. One more thing I should point out before we move on with this, you can also replace this with what I've got programmed here with actually a JPEG image. So if for any reason they've got like a really nice logo that they want within the back office that shows up, in this area here, you can actually take that JPEG image, save it anywhere on your computer, and on the server, I should say, and then within here, just go into collaboration and put within there C:\/ wherever it is, whatever the name of the file happens to be. And as soon as you select on Auto Connect, that's good to go. Now you'll have to exit out of the system and then or the back office and then log back in order for it to take effect. But that image will show up within there. And then finally within here we have email setup. And so within this is where you set up all of the different applications for using email pertaining to the Pixel POS system. Okay, so the first thing we have within here is things like the email server's address or network name. So within here, if it's POP or whatever happens to be, however your email is set up, just make sure that you have email server capability within the client's site so they can actually send out emails. So within here you have the address that you would put in for that. Also, you identify as far as a port as well on it, because you may be working through firewalls and so on. So you may have to consult with some technical people at their end to make sure that you've got a proper port for that. SSL, Secured Socket Layer Protection. So within this, it's just a security encryption stuff. Okay, I won't get too technical into it, but basically this is just to make sure that everything is secured when it's transferred or relayed across. Then you have, as far as the username and the password as well for that particular user. On here you have the sender, whoever that will be. Okay, I've got the admin website, and also their name that will be displayed when emails come across. And so what will happen here, you can actually send off a test email just to make sure that this information is going to come across. And then you've got the different applications that you can do over here on the right-hand side. So just an overview of the different things. Enable sending email for employee schedule. Okay, so when we get into the employee schedule function, I'll be showing you where you can go about taking all of the scheduling that you've done for your staff, and you can just send out an email to them saying, here's your work shift for the next 2 weeks or something like that. The next one down here is enable sending email for Web2Go. Web2Go is our web-based ordering system. Now this is for situations, actually it works also with this one here, confirmation agent as well. Within Web2Go, first of all, I go to sign into the system. I know you haven't seen it yet, just kind of walk through mentally with me for a moment. I go to the website, I want to get into it. Oh man, I forgot my password. I know my email address, but I forgot my password. So you can select on I forgot my password, put in your email address, and then what will happen is that it'll go into Web2Go, it'll look up your member record, and here is your email address, that matches up, so here is your password to get into the system. And then from there it will email that password to you, then you can log in and order your meal. The confirmation agent is for situations where you've logged in, you've ordered your meal, and you send it off and you pay for it and so on like that. And then you'll come back with a confirmation email to you saying that we have received your order, here's what it is, and you paid for it, via credit card or whatever it happens to be. Enable SMTP and SMTP for Report Manager and Alert Manager, or Report Viewer and Alert Manager. Now, Report Viewer is our reporting tool, and within here you can actually email out reports. So I generate, an employee performance report or whatever it happens to be, and I want to email it to Tom, the manager. So right from within Report Viewer, I can actually just select on that, and boom, it'll send out that email to him. Also, I have for Alert Manager, this is a self-reporting tool that we have that I'll be showing you later on as well, where if the system noticed that, holy mackerel, we've got 5 voids that were done, or somebody tipped over 20%, or sales are down, to less than $100 or something like that. Whatever the situation happens to be, the system has self-reporting capability, and what it will do then is that it can take whatever this happens to be and email that information to the appropriate manager that you programmed within Alert Manager to say, I need the systems administrator or the manager on duty or the owner of the company to be notified of whatever this circumstance happens to be. Now, within the employee schedule, remember I was talking about that just earlier in the previous tab here, so we have kind of the layout that would be sent across to the employees regarding their schedule. So here is the business name, so the name of the establishment. This is a field that's in the within the system set programming within here. It's actually the first field within here. A business name is the company name. So Scott's Burger Palace or something like that. Your employee schedule, and then within here we have other database information as well. The employee being John Smith, the date range, from November 12th to 16th, and then here's your schedule information that we've programmed in for you. So all of that is set up within there. And then we have things like the confirmation agents. So within here, first of all, enable sending email for confirmation agent. You can enable or disable this if you want or don't want confirmation of web-based orders. Send for all internet orders. Yes, I want to do that as well, or you can make it specific to just a few. Send on close orders only. Okay, so those in which case the transaction was settled at that point. Okay, it may be a thing such as COD. I don't need to send a confirmation on a COD, but I do need it if they paid via credit card up front. send for order types, and then you identify as far as the sale types for this. Delivery and pickup is the most common ones for that. Coming down below that, pertaining to those emails as well, we have the title for that and also the body and what kind of information will show up within there, just as we had with the previous one as well. So that gives you an idea of what you can do within the email setup for that. The next one down is station setup. Now within station setup, this is where you program all of the information on a per station basis. Now before I go into any of this, take a look at this. I'm going to come down to this right down here. This is the navigation bar. We've got like the first record, previous, next, and the last record. Also we have this little button here that says search as well. That's actually a flashlight that you're looking at there. If I select on this, then this will show me all of the different records that reside within whatever it is I'm looking at, and then I can jump to any given one, click on OK. I'm now on station 11. Coming down to the last one, you notice that we've got 20 stations pre-programmed into the system as well. I just want to point that out. If your installation does exceed beyond 20 stations, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, you can add in additional ones. There's no limit to the number of stations you can program in. Just select on the plus sign to do that. The only limitation you may experience will be within the license manager, because you're not licensed for X number of stations that you're programming into it. So just make sure you've got sufficient licensing for that as well. But in terms of the actual programming itself, there's no limit to that. All right, we also have refresh as well. So as you make changes on the system, if you notice, hey, I made a change that didn't kick on through, just click on refresh, and it'll refresh whatever it is you got on the screen. Also, we have insert record as well to insert new ones. And this one here is actually a pen being held by a hand. And if you select on that, that's to edit the existing record. Also, what you can do as well is just click anywhere on this, and as soon as you make a change to anything, then it will go into an edit mode as well. Now, taking a look at what we have on the screen, first of all, we have the station ID here. Okay, so as I click on through, station 3, 4, 5, 6, and notice that the descriptions change appropriately with that as well. All right, the next thing we have over way over on the right here is active. You're going to see is active all through the back office, and what this is the checkbox which identifies whether this record is physically active or not. If I uncheck a box like this, then basically this database record will be declared as inactive, which means it will emulate deletion. All right, coming back to what I mentioned in one of our earliest sessions, is that PixelPoint is well known for being stable. It's really well known for being its stability, and it doesn't go down. It doesn't break down certainly when you don't want it to. And part of that is the fact that we don't physically delete records on a regular basis. What we do is we just kind of set them as inactive, and this way the structure of that database remains intact. Whether the records are visible or not, whatever it happens to be. But the database itself is rigid, and so that's why we set these things as active and inactive. Remember, just I had mentioned this earlier in the previous session, if you ever need to retrieve a record that's been set as inactive, then all you have to do is come up to where it says Window, Show Active Records Only. If I uncheck that, now what I can do is I can go in to, let's say, station, for example, if I disabled a station, and I would be able to see any inactive records. And if there were any, okay, there's one right there. Station 3 has been set as inactive. Then what I can do is just check on this, and station 3 is now active and visible on the system, and I can work with it again. All right, coming back to where we are here. Now, we're broken off into several tabs again. On this first tab, we have station options and all this kind of stuff pertaining to this given station that I'm working on, being station 1. As far as the descriptions go, I would probably just leave them as they are. They're pretty stable, and it makes sense to everyone. The only exception would be maybe if you're in a foreign country and you need to program it in Spanish or French or whatever it happens to be. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have auto logout in seconds. Now, this is actually to help prevent problems in the system where you've got table service and you've got users who are logging in and logging out on a regular basis. Now, what this does is that it will sit on the floor layout screen, the table layout screen, for X number of seconds, and if it's not touched by anyone, then it will automatically log that user out. Okay, so in here, for example, a typical example of this would be 20. I would put in something like 20. Now, what that means is as follows. You and I are both waiters on the system, and you log in and you pick table 4, and you go in, you place the order for that. and then you send it off, and you're sitting back on the table layout screen, and you're not really thinking, and you decide to walk away, and so it's sitting with you logged onto the system, and the floor layout screen is sitting there. Me, as Scott, the other waiter, I walk up to the system, and I'm not thinking either, and I see there's all the tables. I'm just taking care of now this new order for table 9. So I select on table 9, I put in my order, and here we go. And so what happens now is that it's still logged in under your name. I put in the order for table 9, and guess what? You are now responsible for my table. And when I log out, then I won't be able to get back into my own table either. I'll need to come to you to be able to do that. So what this does is that if you walk away from the station and it's sitting on the floor layout screen and it's sitting there for 20 seconds, then the system is going to say, you know what, I think we've just kind of abandoned this station, so I'm going to just automatically log you out and it'll be ready for the next person. So that's what that's intended for. If you leave it at 0, then it'll just stay as it is. As long as it's 1 or more, then it's going to start counting. Don't do it for 1 or 5 seconds because people won't have time to do anything. All right, the next thing down here is this station uses the following. Now we have here a number of different selections that's available to us within menu. PixelPoint can handle multiple menus. Now what I mean by multiple menus is, for example, picture walking into a mall and you go to the food court. So here we have a food court with all of these different shops that sell different things, burgers and sandwiches and salads, and another one that sells pizza, and another one sells Chinese food, and whatever it happens to be. And all of those different restaurants could actually be on one PixelPoint system. They all have different menus, they all have different staff, they all have different hours of operation, and they all have different layouts of their screen as well. The screen can look entirely unique to each one of those establishments. When you go in to set up the PixelPoint system on all these different things, then all you have to do is just go into here and identify which menu they are using. There's another place that you go to identify the template that they use for that and what contents would be within each one of those. That's all within menu setup. I'll be showing you later on. But in here, this is where you identify the menu that this particular station uses. So for example, if I'm working on stations 1 and 2 at the beginning of this food court, and it happens to be an A&W restaurant, then I would have an A&W menu in here, and I would identify on those 2 stations I want to use the A&W menu. If the next one over happens to be KFC, then stations 3 and 4, I identify within here as the KFC menu, in which case then when you log into each one of these respective stations, the menu that shows up on the screen when you open up a check will be A&W or KFC or whatever it happens to be that you're programming into the system. Take a look underneath that, using order form, blah, blah, blah. So this identifies as far as the particular template that is being used for that given menu. All right, and we'll take a look again at menu setup much further on into this course. All right, the next thing we have here is alternate order form. And so what you can select within here is an alternate form ordering screen. That's what this is right here, using order form, blah, blah, blah. This is where you can set up an alternate one in here. Why would we have an alternate one? Because it depends on the resolution. For example, let's say stations 1 and 2 for my A&W restaurant are 2 different pieces of equipment, okay, and I'm just short on a budget, so one station is set up and it's got a 1024 by 768 display. The other one will be using the same menu, but the order form that I'm going to use for this is set up for an 800 by 600 screen, just because I'm working with different resolutions and things like that. So if that is the case, you can actually use the same menu, but a different template for these different stations as well. So this way you don't have to duplicate all this kind of stuff. You can just actually identify within here that station 1 will use the 1024 and station 2 will also use the same menu but use the alternate form of the 800 by 600 display, for example. Coming down below that, we've got other forms that are available within here. All of these forms, I should point out, just as a little sneak preview, are designed under Form Designer, which we'll be taking a look probably within the next session. The first thing we have here is finish forms, okay? So when you go to the finish screen, I want to identify how that finish screen is going to look. Just like the order screen, it is completely customizable, so you can have different finish screens or settlement screens on a per station basis. Also, we have question forms as well. Now, when forced questions come up, there's several different ways they can appear on the system. They can appear like in a list where you can select from there. They can also appear in a big window where you select the buttons and so on. And some other ways as well. I'll talk about that later on. But another way is like in a kiosk application where I have a specific form or screen set up for force questions to display, in which case I'll have the solution, or the selections will appear maybe within a picture type format or some special graphic text or something. And I can have a pretty screen anyway with my force questions, and so you can identify that on a per station basis. Also within here, we have theme form. Theme being the color of the PixelPoint system. You'll see, for example, here I've got blue showing up excuse me, within my back office. And this is reflected also within the front end as well. My stuff shows up in blue. If I want to change the color scheme of the PixelPoint system, you know how it used to be yellow, now it's the PAR blue. But we also have a number of different ones that are available within the system, and you can actually identify what color scheme or theme that you want to use for this, again, to make it a little more appropriate to the establishment. You know, you want to match up with the decor of the establishment, make it look like this point-of-sale system was written right from scratch specifically for this restaurant so that it looks like it's part of the whole thing. And if that's the case, then you can actually go about changing it to a different theme within here as well. Well, again, we'll take a look a little more at that when we get into Form Designer. Underneath that, we have Floor File. Now, this is an FLR file extension, and what we have here is your table layout. This is for table layout situations or dine-in situations where you actually go in and you place table 1, 2, 3, and 4 in a certain space and so on, how you want it to look and so on. And then when you start up this station for table service, then boom, here's the floor layout as it appears as you programmed into the system. And in here you're tagging, I want this particular floor layout on this particular station to look this way. Okay? Picture this for a moment, and this is a good thing for salespeople, is that you've got 4 stations, one located in each corner of a very large room. And in the middle of the room, you've got all of your tables laid out for your guests to sit and dine. And what you could potentially do, if you wanted, is you can have 4 different FLR or floor layout files programmed into the system, each one reflecting the floor layout from the perspective of that station. So if I'm at station 3, for example, and I'm looking at the layout of the floors from where I'm standing right now, I can actually have a floor layout that would match what I'm looking at from where I am. Whereas if I went over to station 2, I'd be looking at it from another angle from that corner of the room, and I could have another floor file for that. So there's lots of stuff you can do with that, and you can have different floor files programmed into the system, and you tag on the appropriate one that you want for this given station. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have, let me see, customer display. Now, PixelPoint will work with stations that have customer displays or dual screen display systems. And PAR offers those. So if I'm Scott the customer and I'm facing you and you're placing my order, I actually have a screen in front of me that's showing my order as it appears. And to do that, all you have to do is just select on this and you identify, okay, this will be, you know, customer display 1024. You know, let's say it's an 800 by 600 display. So I select on that, and whatever you have programmed into the system as the customer display for that, that's what's going to show up on the screen. And again, completely customizable in terms of how it looks and what it contains and so on. Now you'll notice that upon selecting that, I now have this new field that shows up called Screen Saver. Again, this is designed for the customer display, and this is what happens. I get this showing up on that screen when I'm in a transaction. When I'm not in a transaction, what shows up on that screen? Well, you can have a screensaver set up for that as well. So it may have some advertising or the local weather or whatever, you know, might be of interest to customers to look at when you're not in the middle of a transaction. And so in that case, you can actually program in the screensaver in there, and this is what will show up on that customer display screen. If I take out the one above, then the one below is gone as well. Coming down below that, we have keyboard form. Now, by default, the conventional North American, this is the way we do it, keyboard, this is referred to as the QWERTY keyboard, is what shows up on the system here, is the default one. QWERTY is the English conventional keyboard. If you take a look at your keyboard in front of you, if you have one, you start in the top left corner, Q, W, E, R, T, Y, okay, are the first few letters, and that's how you identify that as being a North American keyboard. If you happen to be listening in from France, for example, you would be using an AVERTY keyboard, A-V-E-R-T-Y, because the A would be in the top left position. And if there's any other specialized ones, you can do that as well. One of the things Form Designer will allow you to do is program in your own custom keyboards as well. So not only can you have all those keys, but you can program in additional function buttons in there as well. In some cases, that may be quite useful. For example, if you're doing a lot with driving directions, you can actually create entire buttons that instead of having an A, B, C, D, or you can have those in there as well, but also have buttons that say street, avenue, boulevard, north, south, east, west, whatever happens to be like that, and you can come up with a really customized keyboard if desired. And then you can program it here on a per station basis. Coming down below that, we have floor zoom 1 to 1000% and defaults to 100%, which means when you're setting up your floor layout as it appears on the screen, if you're just trying to tweak it a little bit, you can actually zoom in and out, maybe up and down 1 or 2 percentages just to make it match up exactly with your screen and your resolution that you're working with. But also as well, if you find that I'm programming all this in, but it's very common for me to be working on a station that's in a banquet hall, and I need to fit about 300 tables in there, so I need them really small. If that's the case, then you can actually adjust the zoom out percent on that given station, so that when you go into it, then it'll really pull back from the floor layout to allow you to see more tables, or fewer tables, depending on your situation. Coming down below that, we have some check boxes here. The first one is always print receipt on close. Pretty self-explanatory, which means that whenever you close a check, print the receipt. Next one down is station has magnetic card reader attached. Now, this is actually a little wordy, but I'll tell you what it does. Remember on the login screen, when you log into the front end, you've got the manual login button. If you want to remove that button from the front end, then just check on this box, which means you can only do magnetic card swipe. This is actually really good for situations where you have a station, maybe a large complex, for example, that has a lot of employees, and you have one station that's actually dedicated for nothing but logging in and out of staff. If that is the case, they need their card reader, or they need their magnetic card in order to log in and log out, or clock in and clock out. And if that's the case, then you can check or uncheck that box for it. If you just leave it as it is, then you'll have manual login available so people can manually log in, but they can also use any of the other methods that I've described earlier on as well. Print type of sale on order is pretty self-explanatory as well. When I print off an order to a kitchen or to a bar, then I can put on this, have included on it as well the type of sale, whether it's dine-in or takeout or pickup or delivery or whatever it happens to be, then you can include that within there as well. Coming off to the right-hand side, we have default sale type. So within here, on station 1, when I go into the thing, what sale type will be the default for that? And in there, I can set it to dine-in, or if this is at a takeout counter, for example, I can have it set to pickup, or maybe at a delivery section, I can set it for delivery. If it's room service, I may program in a new sale type for that and set that as the default sale type, whatever it happens to be. Revenue center. Now, we haven't quite talked too much about revenue centers yet, but basically a revenue center is a profit center. I want you to picture for a moment a hotel. In this hotel, we've got the nightclub, we've got the lounge, and we've got the coffee shop. Each one of those is its own menu, its own staff, its own management, yet they're all sharing on that same point of sale system, much like what I mentioned with the food court as well, same situation. Each one of those is a profit center or a revenue center. And within here, you can actually create multiple revenue centers, and in this, you identify, in this particular case, which stations apply to which revenue centers. So if I did have, for example, coming back to our food court, one for A&W and one for KFC, then station 1 would be an A&W, station 3 would be a KFC. Coming over to the next one, we have printer ports. Now on yours, you'll see there's probably a full set of names all running down here. I've cleared off a few. These are referred to as printer channels. Printer channels are basically a classification or a path that a print job would take in order to get to its printing destination. I'll talk more about printers later on in a later session where I go through the concepts of printing and so on. But as far as what I've got here, these are pretty easy to figure out. Local, kitchen, and bar, which means local means a local printer. Any kind of printing that is done on a local printer, such as anything related to credit card checks, for credit card slips, for example, printing a check, printing a receipt. Those are all local printing, anything transaction oriented. And so on there, that would be my first printer channel. Underneath that, if I order any kind of food, I want it to print to a printer in the kitchen, for example. So I would have a channel set up for that. All my food would print to a printer, a kitchen printer channel, and then bar as well. So if I order a beer or a glass of wine, I want it to print to the bar. So it would follow that path or that channel to the respective bar. And so I've got one set up for that. I'll talk about more printer channels and so on again later on. But in here, off to the right-hand side on Station 1, you identify as far as which particular printer am I going to print to on this given thing. Okay, so in this, what you do is you lay out on a per station basis. If I order a sandwich or food from Station 1, what printer do I want to go to? I identify that within here. Okay, I'll say Kitchen 8, for example. Okay, if I order a drink from Station 1, what printer do I want to go to? And on here, then I couldn't look in here. Okay, there's my bar printer. I'll go to that. And so this way, this manages as far as the printing mechanics of the printing from Station 1. So depending on what type of item I order, this is where it's going to print if I order it from Station 1. Because I may have, like, again, a big entertainment complex. You know, I might have 20 stations, I might have 3 bars, I might have 15 printers. So you really need to identify as far as where each of these is going to go and map them out within here. Coming off to the right-hand side, we have advanced options here. I'm going to just turn these off so I don't get any error messages showing up to the front end. Coming off the right-hand side, advanced options should be 1. 1 represents the first printer channel. The first printer channel here is local. It should always be local. And if it is always local, because every point-of-sale system needs to be able to print a check. If it doesn't print a check, it's not much of a point-of-sale system. It may not have a kitchen, it may not have a bar, but it will need to print a check. So local is always your first printer channel. And within here, all of these 1s mean that these respective tasks will be activated via that printer channel. Okay, because, for example, quite often when you're plugging in cash drawers, for example, they actually plug into the local printer. There's actually ports in there for that. And so the drawer is kicked open based on the print job that's going through to that printer. And so in here, this will identify that. And as you can see, we've got 3 drawers that you can actually tag in to this as well, because PixelPoint will accommodate up to 3 cash drawers per station. Okay, not all hardware handles that. Many of them just handle 2 cash drawers, but PixelPoint will allow up to 3. Also, receipt printer as well. So if I want a receipt to print, then I leave that at 1, and when I print it off, then it's going to kick onto that. Now you'll see down here I've got a whole separate channel I created here called Receipt Audit. Okay, I'm Scott, the manager, and I've got a receipt printer in my office. And every time someone prints a check, I want a copy of it in my office as well. So what I did was I actually created a channel for that. I identified my printer being audit number 5, for example. And that's the printer that's assigned to it. And then in here, where it comes to receipt printer, I've got a 1, and this is channel number 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So in here, I'm going to put a 1 and then a 9. Now that's not actually 19. You don't need a comma in there because there's only 9 printer channels. But in this, I put in a 1 and a 9. So that way, whenever someone prints a check and it goes through, the receipt is printed through on the local receipt printer, then it will also go through to channel number 9, which is my audit printer. So I'll have 2 printouts of that, one at each end. We also have charge slip printers as well. A charge slip printer is where you actually take like a cardboard or a pre-printed check. You slide it into the printer, hit the button, and it goes chunk, chunk, chunk like this, and it prints off everything on that pre-printed check. We also have report printer as well. Any kind of reports, such as your end of day, for example, or your cash out reports, all that kind of stuff is activated through the local printer as well. You will never need to, in 99.9% of the time, you will never need to change any of these, so you can just leave them as they are. The next one over is fonts. Within here, this is all fonts within the PixelPoint system that pertains to this given station. So this is for things, for example, like, you know how the text looks on manual login, on the login screen, or all of the function buttons that show up along the blue bar down at the bottom where you've got things like quantity and logout and your settings and all that kind of stuff. That is what all this text pertains to within here. There's a variety of them all through this. And if for any reason you need to change that text around, like how the text appears, then actually you can change them within here. And again, this is on a per station basis. 99.9% of the time you'll never need to change it, but you can do that within here. All right, coming over to the Advanced tab. Within here, we've got all kinds of things that pertain to, again, this given station. The first thing here is station price level. This is the first of 4 areas where you can actually assign different price levels to items. Now, a price level being, for example, if I order a cheeseburger, I pay, let's say, $3. Now, if I order a cheeseburger, but I'm Scott the member, I may pay $2. Or if I order it from Station 1 specifically, I may pay $5. Whereas if I order it from Station 2, I may pay $3. You know, all different circumstances like this. PixelPoint allows up to 10 price levels that you can program into it, and 4 areas where you can apply these different levels. Now in here, the first one being station by station number. So on this, I can program, for example, all right, there's price level A, force price level A. So if I have $3 for my cheeseburger in there, then on Station 1, I would pay that price. Now if I went over to Station 2, I can say force price level B. In which case then I pay a different price, if the prices were different, on Station 2. And there are actually establishments that do this, that based on the station that you're ordering from, you can actually force across a different price. This is really good actually, for example, where you are in a hotel and you have, let's say, Station 7. And Station 7 is the station for handling room service. And so if that is the case, you can actually force the room service price level onto that given station so that whenever I order things, I'll be ordering off the conventional menu, but the price will actually be adjusted to allow for room service, that kind of thing. So now we also have different areas here as well. The 3 areas where you can also apply price levels. So the first one being schedule pricing, which is handled through report categories. I'll talk about that when we get to it. Also member groups, as I said, for example, I'm Scott the member. Now I can have seniors pricing, student pricing, VIP pricing, for example, and you can set it up so that Station 1 would honor pricing based on the member group that you're using. And we also have based on sale type as well. So within here, again, if I have like a sale type of room service, I can have a whole price level for that, and I would pay a different price again if it's for delivery, and another price if it's pickup, and another price if it's dine-in. So you can have all these different forms of pricing as well. Coming down below that, we also have warehouse depletion. Now, warehouse depletion is for inventory situations where you are working with multiple warehouses. Now, in this, I can actually break it out. So, for example, a warehouse can be, let's say, like a bar refrigerator. Okay, you got several different bars in this big entertainment complex, and they all have their respective refrigerators behind the bars, and those are set up as warehouses. So, depending on what stations are ordering from what bar, you can actually identify within here which bar refrigerator they're going to actually be pulling from as well using this. So you can program all of that within there and break it out on a warehouse depletion on a per station basis. I'll talk more about that when we get into inventory. Underneath that, we have quick order table number. Now within here we have, again, I mentioned earlier on, you know, when in doubt, the answer is there's no limit. And when it comes to table numbers and tables in general, there is no limit to the number of tables that you can program into a PixelPoint system. But there are some things that we've kind of reserved aside for certain specific functions. One of them being the 30,000 series of tables. Okay, from 30,000 up to 32,000, you can actually assign filters for these tables within these different station layouts. And what they do is allow you to filter saved checks and get checks. They're an auto-split table or auto-split check. Okay, so for example, I pull up to a drive-through and I order my meal, and that is actually saving through to table 30,000. Next guy pulls up, he orders his meal, you save that check as well. It's saving through to that same table 30,000. And the next guy pulls up and the same thing again. And what will happen is every time you save a check to one of these 30,000 tables, then it will auto-split that. So now you've got a split check with each one of these drive-through orders, separate drive-through orders on it. And within this particular filter here, what it allows you to do is actually isolate specific stations to these auto-split tables. So this way, if I'm working with multiple windows, for example, let's say I got 2 drive-through lanes going, and they each have their own respective windows, and on these I've got stations 1 and 2 are handling drive-through A, 3 and 4 are handling drive-through B. Well, they're all saving checks, they're all retrieving checks, but you don't want them to get all mixed up and confused. So what you can do then is within here, you can identify stations 1 and 2 will use 30,001, stations 3 and 4 will use table 30,002. And this way, when all those auto splits come through, they'll come through to different separate tables, and then from there, you've got no overlapping of these saved orders. That's a mouthful and quite a lot to swallow within your brain, but kind of just go with that. You can always click on rewind and have Scott explain that again. But it's also explained within the manuals as well. Okay, next down we have print receipt reminder message. Okay, smile and say thank you. So whenever you print a receipt, this little bulletin message will show up on the screen. This is a friendly reminder for whatever it is you want to reply across to your staff and make sure that they're aware of it. And then I'll just stop on this last one, then we'll kick on for a break. Kiosk employee. One of the things that PixelPoint can do is you can program it for kiosk applications. It's a self-ordering station. And that being the case, if I do program station 1, for example, to be a kiosk station, then I need the system to be able to automatically log in as soon as a customer walks up and touches the screen. And so to do that, you can actually program in a kiosk employee in here, and all kiosk sales will be allocated to that pseudo employee on the system. And this kind of allows you to override the whole security logging in and logging out on a per transaction basis that we conventionally would do with any other employee. Okay, I'm just going to pause on where we are right now. We're at roughly 2 o'clock my local time, and we're going to just take a break for about 5 minutes. So get up and stretch, grab yourself a drink if you'd like, and whatever else, and I'll see you back in 5 minutes. We'll just stay on the screen, and then we'll continue on where we left off. Thanks. Okay, welcome back everyone. We'll just give a couple of seconds here for everyone to kind of gather their seats again, and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay, so continuing on. The next thing we have down the right-hand side is all these little check boxes that perform different things on a per station basis. The first one here is play animation on main screen. Now you may recall when we go into the login screen, you've got that cute little EverServe graphic that shows up on there. And as great as it looks, sometimes it uses up some resources. And so if that is the case, what you can actually do is turn that off if you find it's getting to be a little too intensive on your hardware. And so by unchecking play animation on main screen, what you'll have is a static logo showing up on there. And all of that cycling through with all the custom graphics and stuff that I had described in the first session, that will not show up on there either. It'll just be a static image. All right, the next one down is disable save get check function. Okay, save check and get check. I briefly kind of glanced on this with a number of different applications up to this point. This is for a quick service environment where I've got, for example, I'm doing burger cash, and then for whatever reason I need to save a check on the system, but I'm not dealing with a table. So you can actually, in a quick service environment, select on Save Check. That will actually save that check onto the system. Then if I want to retrieve it, either on this station or any other station, then I can select on Get Check. It'll come up with a list of all saved checks. I select on that one, and I can retrieve it and carry on with it. Very common for drive-through environments, for example. If I want to remove that functionality altogether, just select on Disable Save Get Check function, and those buttons will not appear. The next one down here is Disable Floor Zoom and Out buttons. Okay, so remember on the table layout screen we had the Zoom In, Zoom Out buttons. If you want to take them out, just uncheck that, or check that, I should say. All right, now the next one down here. Tax inclusive pricing when feature code equals 1. Okay, there's a mouthful right there. Now what this pertains to is the use of tax inclusive pricing. This is VAT, remember value added tax I mentioned earlier on in the previous session. And this will allow you to apply this on a per item basis, on a per station basis. Now this is very common for North America where you've got, for example, a food menu and a bar menu. Anyone who's installed in restaurants, you understand that is very common where you'll have a separate bar menu, and the bar menu will have all the prices and they include all applicable taxes. But you only want that on the bar items. You don't want it on the food items. So if that is the case, within product setup we have this field called feature code, and you can put in different numbers to do different things. And one of them, the most common one, is feature code 1, which means that this particular item I'm programming into the system, the price I put in there will include all applicable taxes. So what PixelPoint does, it internally back calculates the amount of the item for you, and then from there adds on the applicable taxes to bring it up to the price that you've put in for it. So for example, if I have a beer, so I'm programming a beer into the system, I give it a price of $4, and I have several different taxes that apply to that, but I want the final total to be $4. Then you can actually apply feature code 1 to that item. Now, on a per station basis, you can identify within here, I want station 1 to be able to honor that. If I order that beer from this station, then I've got this check, which means it will be $4 including tax. If I program in station 2, I can uncheck that box, in which case then when I order that same beer on station 2, it will be $4 plus tax. Okay, so there's two ways you can do it here, just based on this little checkbox indicating tax inclusive pricing when feature code equals 1. This will determine whether this station will honor that or not. The next thing we have here is Start Quick Order Mode in Transaction View. And this also works in conjunction with Start Quick Order Summary by default as well. Now, within here, one of the things you may recall that we took a look at when we were in the front end was this button on the right-hand side underneath the legend called Transaction View. I selected on that, and that brought up a list of all of the different saved checks on the system, really good for a bartender, for example, who's running tabs and so on. You can select on any one of them. It shows the contents of that check, and then from there you can select on Use Check to use the check and so on. Now, I may want to program this particular station as the bar station, and I want it to default to that particular view. Then what you can do is you can just select on Start Quick Order Mode in Transaction View, in which case then I'll have that screen show up. If I have it unchecked, then in Quick Order Mode, I would just have a blank check up on the screen and go beer cash, burger cash, burger cash. But if I want to have that screen up, then I check on this box and it will display with that. Underneath that, we also have display the order summary by that, whether you want to include that summary of, here's the summary of all the information that's showing up in there, and when you select on any given check, and if you check or uncheck that, then that will determine whether that box will also be included within that display or not. Coming down below that, disable transaction view from floor layout. Okay, so within here, if I don't even want that transaction view button to appear on the table layout screen, then I can select on this and it disappears. Disable auto gratuity. Now you may recall that in system setup there was the auto gratuity that I was programming in 15% if there's $200 or more and so on. And on here on a per station basis I can determine that station 1 will honor or not honor that particular auto gratuity. So again, the gratuity may apply on station 1 but not on station 2. And then finally we have sale auth, no pre-auth. Now this is going to show up several times within the back office because there's several different ways you can program this. What sale auth, no pre-auth does is this determines how tips will be applied for charge transactions. Now the way tipping works is, or even charge transactions works is as follows. When you're programming for a hospitality restaurant, especially table service, for example, what happens here is that the order will go through to the bank and it will pre-authorize it and come back saying, yes, this thing is authorized for that. But within that, it will be with the allowance and expectation of a possible charge tip to be applied to it as well. So I got a $100 transaction, goes across to the bank, comes back approved. I can still add on a $10 or $20 tip, charge tip on top of that, and it will still go through and be honored within the credit service or the bank. But what you can do on a per station basis is say, if I do a charge transaction on station number 1, I do not want to have that charge tip required for that transaction. So basically, it will just regard it as $100 transaction, boom, it goes through here, that's it, it's ready to go. It will automatically assume a $0 tip, charge tip for that. Why would I do that? Because station 1 may be at a gift shop. Okay, so in a gift shop, you know, I pick up a newspaper, a pack of gum, whatever it happens to be. It's kind of retail type application. But I'm still on the same POS as all those other stations that are in the restaurant that's right next to me. So if that is the case, then on those I would uncheck this, in which case then, you know, if I do a credit card transaction, then it is going to require that I apply a tip to those charge transactions. But if I do a charge transaction on station 1 in the gift shop, I can check on that, in which case then tipping will not be required for those transactions. The last thing we have for station setup is receipt setup. Now you'll see right now it defaults to nothing. And the reason being is that when there's another place actually within back office to go about setting up the receipt and how it's going to look for all subsequent receipts, that whenever you print a check, print a receipt. And this is where you set up the header and footer. Now what you can do is on a per station basis, you can actually put in a custom receipt for this, in which case then I can put in as far as the header being, here's the name of the establishment and so on like that, then the contents of your check, and then down the bottom of it, then I have the footer on that as well. This is what shows up after the contents of your check. And in here, you can program in all of these different things on a per station basis. Now, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just kind of leave things as they are right now. I'm not going to go into detail on this. The reason being is that I will be covering, just so I can have something to cover when I get to receipt setup under the general setup pull-down menu. But by default here, you would want to leave this as empty, because if you do it within the conventional one under general setup, that applies to all stations. Whereas if you do it within here, you have to program it on a per station basis. And that in itself is fine. With the exception that if I add on a station later on, then I may forget to do it, and it may show up as, you know, your bar and grill or something like that, as opposed to the actual name of the establishment. So if you can, don't do it in here. Do it on the regular one. Just do it in here when it has to be different. Let's say by revenue center, for example. All right, so that was everything within station setup. Now, fortunately, the two longest things to program in PixelPoint are system setup and station setup. As you can see, lots of tabs, lots of fields within each one of these. Everything from this point on tends to pick up the pace a little bit. It's a little bit easier. For example, we're in the revenue center setup now. Revenue center is a profit center. And if I want to go into this to program revenue centers, that's as difficult as it gets. We just have the one field to program within here. Now, as far as revenue centers go, my recommendation is as follows, especially for installers here. If you can, just leave it all within the one revenue center. The reason being it's just so much simpler to program. If you do have to break it off where you've got different revenue centers, then by all means you have that ability to do that. Just make sure that you also apply the stations and the employees and the menu items and so on like that to their respective revenue centers as well. It's just a little bit of extra programming to keep track of things and so on. But it is all available within there. The next thing down is sale type setup. Now within here we have a number of different sale types that handle about 99% of all applications you'll ever experience, but if there's additional ones you need to add in, you can always do that as well. Coming down to the search button, you'll see I got things like catering, delivery, dine-in, drive-through, pickup, and quick service. And within each one of these, you'll see that I've got my description from it. All right, so the sale type description, there's catering, there's delivery, dine-in, and so on. And there's also this cute little icon as well. This will be reflected across within the order screens as well to identify the particular sale type. All right, coming down below that, we have sale type price level. Must also configure within stations. Now remember the price levels within station setup I was identifying with? Well, in here, you can actually identify within here that on a per sale type basis, I want to force a specific price level. So in here, for example, dine-in would all use price level A, whereas for pickup, I might use price level B, which would be a different price, and price level C for delivery or takeout or whatever it's going to be, for price level C. So you can force all these different price levels on a per sale type basis. And that way, for the cheeseburger, then if I order it as dine-in, it'll be one price, takeout, it'll be another price, and delivery, it'll be another price. Coming down the left-hand side, we have these check boxes here. The first one here says, allow sale type on web. Okay, that all has to do with the web-to-go system. And on here, when it comes to selecting what do you want it for delivery or pickup, for example, then you would have this checked if you want to include dine-in. Now, obviously, for web-based ordering, you wouldn't do that, but you would, for pickup and delivery for web-based orders. In which case, then those sale types will show up on that screen. All right, the next thing down here, sale auth, no pre-auth. Okay, I just mentioned that in the previous thing that we were looking at. So on a per sale type basis, this will determine whether you want to include tipping on these charged transactions or not. The next thing down here is enforce member. So if I choose on this sale type, I need to have a member record associated to it. A member record would be things like, for example, a delivery. All right, so I am Scott, the customer, and I call up and I say, I want to order pizza, have it delivered to me, please. Well, you're going to need my name, my phone number, and my address anyway. So I'll be set up as a member on the system, and every subsequent time when I call up, then it'll be the same Scott that you're sending it to. And if that is the case, then on here, if it was delivery, for example, then I can select on enforce member, in which case then that means that if I select a delivery order, then the system will make sure that there is a member who's associated with that record. It will force that to be applied onto that check. Print member information. So along with this as well, here actually let me just come over to what actually uses it. Catering, delivery, there we go. Okay, so on here I've got enforce member, and then within this, print member information, which means when I print off the order that's being made for this delivery order, it will also include the member's name and address and driving directions as well. So all that information will be included on the slip. So this way, when I'm Scott, the pizza delivery guy, I can take a look at the slip, and it will have all of the information I need to deliver this pizza to the right guy at the right place. Enforce future order. Okay, so on this, if I have a certain, let's say delivery, for example, well, maybe not that, but maybe for catering, for example. If it was a catering order, catering would be a future order because I'm going to order 200 chicken salad sandwiches and 150 salads. And this is not going to be made within the next 10 minutes. It's going to be a catered order for a specific date and time. If that is the case for catering, I may want to select on enforce future order, in which case then that will also mean that the system will be intuitive enough that it will say, when do you want this thing delivered? And so that's what that's for. Coming down below that, we have auto order item. On a per sale type basis, you can have the system automatically order something or apply it to the check. Now you'll see, for example, I got one down here, delivery. I got minimum charge. This is just an example, not necessarily the preferred one that I would use here, but I can have like a delivery surcharge, for example, or some other thing like that. Whereas if I select on this particular sale type, I want to include whatever. Okay, now a good example for delivery would be, for example, a condiment package. All right, I may have a condiment package, for example, that has plastic knives, forks, and spoons, and little packets of the salt and pepper, for example. And I want to include that on every delivery order or every pickup order. So if that is the case, then what I can do is I can program this in here that when I select this particular sale type, order that condiment thing as well. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have delivery mode. Now remember the delivery order status form that I looked at, okay, where you've got the person who takes the delivery orders or takes the pickup orders, and you have drivers assigned to them and so on like that. That was covered back, I think, in our first or second session, where we were looking at deliveries and pickups and so on like that. In here, this is where you determine where these sale types will show up. Now, anything that we've pre-programmed in the system are properly programmed in here, so that delivery orders will show up on that screen by selecting on delivery. Pickup orders will show up within the pickup tab or selection within that particular screen as well. And if it's set to dine-in, then they will not even show up within that whole thing because they're dine-in orders. They're not applicable to any of that delivery pickup stuff. But if there's additional ones you program in, such as, for example, room service, again, we don't have room service in there. So if there was something like room service would be a delivery setting for that. You may want to put that in so that when I select on room service, it'll show up in the delivery order taker screen. From there, the driver instead would be the delivery person who's going to take it up to that given room. Coming over to the right-hand side, we also have tax exemptions as well. So you have all applicable taxes based on these sale types, but certain sale types within certain regions, based on your local tax laws and so on, may be exempt from certain taxes. And so if that is the case, then you can identify within here that, if in the state of Rhode Island, then, the state, delivery orders are exempt from the state tax, for example, or a liquor tax or whatever it happens to be. And so I can put in these tax exemptions, and they will be automatically applied within the check based on this sale type. Coming down below that, we have print receipt location. Now, it defaults to local. So basically, when you print off the receipts, boom, here you go. Now, if I have something not so much for delivery, but let's say for catering, for example. All right, a catering order may be something really large, or maybe for a banquet hall. I'm going to be spending, let's say, minimum of $500 on this thing, or if it's for my daughter's wedding, and I'm going to spend 20 grand on this particular banquet or whatever it happens to be, then on here you can actually have the receipt print out to a separate location, a different printer channel than what it would conventionally show up within here. The reason for this is that I may have a nice receipt printer set up. If you're going to spend $20,000 on my establishment, I'm going to at least give you a nice presentable receipt as well, and on some nice card stock or whatever it's going to be. And so if that is the case, you can actually reallocate the printing of receipts on a per sale type basis within here to different locations and different printers. Again, we have the icon, as I mentioned here, that will show up and be reflected within the front end if you wish. Also, load image. So within here, you can actually load in other images as well, have them in place of that. And also clear image as well. So I made a mistake. They want to do that, clear it off. All right, the next thing we have down here is POS function setup. Now, POS function setup, this is basically for adjusting the various menus that show up in your front end. Now, this is not the menu item menus I'm talking about, but actually the function menus. We have the manager function menu, and we have the sales function menu. And within here, you'll see, for example, I've got by default here the manager function menu showing up in front of me. And remember when we hit manager within the front end, and I've got all those buttons that show up, and we walk through each one of those? Well, those buttons are reflected across within here. And so you'll see, for example, I've got sales functions. So within here, I select on the Manager menu, there's Sales Functions, Set Weather, Back Office. Those are the first three buttons that show up within there. Now I also have some other symbols that show up within here as well. First of all, I got a little green down arrow, which means that there is an associated submenu that's also tied into this particular function. If I hit Sales Function, then it's going to take me to a Sales submenu, okay, which is actually one of the other menus within here. Set Weather, this is a set function for that, and it will perform that given function. Back Office, it will take me into the Back Office application. Now this is actually a whole separate exe. You see here I've got exe set up for that because I can run Back Office, from its own separate exe within my Windows desktop, for example. I don't need to go into the front end to do it. So with all this kind of functionality, there's a lot you can do with this. First of all, I can reassign the position of any of these functions. So for example, I don't want Set Weather there. I want it maybe over here. It's just a matter of click and drag, and you can move these buttons around to different locations. Other things we can do as well, you'll see on the right-hand side I've got all of these different applications that I can also add in here as well. So for example, if I want to do the tender balancing for the overall establishment, I can just do a click and drag on here, and now this button has tender balancing moved into it. Or if I want to do something like Report Viewer, then I can stick in Report Viewer. And Report Viewer is a whole separate exe, so it'll be brought across as well. So there's lots of things you can do like that. Actually, if there's also something in here, let's say Image Updater. Okay, this is for updating your images of the truck and the delivery things, sale types and methods of payment and so on like that. And if I want to do some kind of external updating like that, I can put that in there. If I don't want it, again, I can drag it back here. Or another thing I can do is just drag it up to the trash can, and it'll knock it out of there as well. Now you'll see Image Updaters back in here. So you're not really affecting anything here other than taking it out of this whole list. Now we also have this thing here that says Show All. If I select on this, this is all functions, all menus. And so from here I can take something within another menu, like let's say Sold In Item, and I can actually put it right within that button position on the Manager function screen. And so now I have that capability in there as well. Some other things that we can also apply within this is if I go to the empty button, I can right-click on it, and you'll see I've got within here it says New Function. If I select on New Function, I can actually program in a whole new application within here. Now, one that I did, just as an example, because you probably saw it in there, was Scott. Okay, here's one that I did on a previous thing. I'll go into Edit on that. So here's Scott. I have Help Memo, and in here you can just put in any kind of text that would apply to, explain what this particular thing does. And then I have this checkbox that says Run Program. And then from here, you can identify what that exe is. So the nice thing about this is basically, again, for salespeople on this one, is that you can actually apply external programs into the PixelPoint menus as well. So that I hit on Manager Function menu, and if they need to get into a spreadsheet, an accounting program, a word processor, whatever it happens to be within the front end, then you can actually do that directly from here just by programming the external exe into that particular thing. And then from there, I select on OK, and there's the application right within there. Also within this as well, you can apply a security level to it as well. So if I've got a game of solitaire that I may want to play within the front end, not that you want to do that, but you can do it, then you can have that in there, but I can say only managers can do that, in which case then you can apply a security level to it. Also, we have some additional parameters within here. A lot of it technical-based stuff. I really wouldn't worry too much about this. This is really the real meat and potatoes of programming and all of these different things. And if you decide, no, I don't want it, then I can either click it to the right or bring it up to the trash can, and it's out of there. Now, in this, we also have a lot of other things as well. First of all, we got the table one. Okay, table, set number of customers, transfer, check, move, table. Okay, so you may recall that that's the sales function one that is when you're within a transaction. We also have employee as well. This is one of the submenus. Remember when we went into manager, employee functions, then within here we got things like good performance, poor performance, and so on like that. We also have sales. Okay, day view sales, day finish sales. There's the end of day process and so on. Product. This is for anything product related. Okay, so within here like sold in, sold out, bar interface, countdown, that kind of stuff. Special, shutdown system, exit POS software. Again, one of the submenus on that. Now we also have within here as well, setup menu as well. And within this, you can actually program in external programs or additional buttons that can be applied within the back office. Okay, so when you're setting up your PixelPoint system, the setup menu is part of that, and then within here we've got back office, and this is where you can actually program in additional programs that can be accessed through the back office as well. So lots of really great little things like that. Oh, and finish form. And so there's additional ones here as far as no tax and void and quantity and so on like that. So lots of great little things that you can program into this. And within here, there's all kinds of functions. I won't go into, we're just too short on time, but there's all kinds of additional really great little functions that you can program in here that you may find that, oh, I didn't know PixelPoint could do that as well. So it's worth taking a look at some of these things as well, going in, and if you find something in here that, oh, I never saw that one before, then you can actually select on it and just see what it does. For those who are experienced installers, you'll notice that we've also taken some of the stuff from PixelBase and applied it in here as well. So for example, here's one, move open transactions in the current day. This was actually a function that used to be offered within PixelBase, and we've actually taken it out of there now and made it available within here that you can apply this within here. This is for situations, just for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, is for situations where I've got rogue transactions that may be saved in the system and have never been closed. Okay, in a 24-hour operation, it is possible, for example, for a guy to come in, he orders a cup of coffee, changes his mind, gets up, walks away, and the staff's too busy to notice that he's gone, and he never gets his coffee, and the check is never closed. And then 6 months from now, the end of day is starting to take a little bit longer and longer to process. The reason being that it's looking back all the way back into old previous days to see, oh, I've still got open transactions, so here they are. But they've all disappeared in the system. So what you can do is just use this to bring them all into current day, and then you can clear them out from there. That's just the technical end of what I'm talking about. But there's lots of different functions that you can program within here. All right, the next thing we have is payment methods setup. So I selected on this, and this is where you put in all of the different tenders for the PixelPoint system. So coming into this, the first thing we have here, we're on cash, and we've got Visa, MasterCard, and all these other ones as well. And on this, we have, first of all, the description. So my recommendation is that leave the cash record as it is. The reason being is that there's a lot of stuff that's internally programmed into this to make sure that whatever the base currency is, that will be the cash record. So always leave that. Whatever your base currency is, no matter what part of the world, cash is cash, and whatever your local currency is, that's what this one record will represent. Any other currencies beyond that, any foreign currencies, then you can use any other record for that. But leave this first one as it is. Now, just to the right of that, we have is currency. If I have this checked, then that means that the system will recognize it is not any form of credit and will not make any assumptions based on that either. It's either credit or currency. That's basically what it comes down to. And so if you have this checked, then that means that this is a form of monetary paper, money of some kind. Coming down below that, we have exchange rate. Now, the exchange rate of 1, cash is cash for wherever I am. If I'm American or Canadian or Mexican or whatever happens to be, then whatever the local currency is, that's what this is, an exchange rate of 1. But if I have a foreign currency as well, for example, if I also accept sterling, okay, British pounds, then 1 British pound may be the equivalent of $1.50 of my base cash. So in which case, then I would put in 1.50 for the exchange rate, in which case £4. All right, in which case then what the system will do is when it's tendering something off to a foreign currency, you'll see what it is with that exchange rate. Now, PixelPoint does not look to international exchange rates or what it currently is within the market or anything like that. You set it within here, and that's the way it is. So if it changes on a daily basis or something like that, then it's up to the establishment. If they really want to keep up with it that much, then they can change it in here on a daily basis. But we don't automate this process at all. All right, to the right of that, we have a number of decimal places. Now, again, depending on the currency that you're working with, some of them have 0 decimal places. Some of them have 3 decimal places. So depending on what the currency happens to be. Anything North America and most parts of Europe, you'll be looking at 2 decimal places. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have minimum security required. I can apply a security level on a per method of payment basis. So on here, for example, I can set it so that my teenage staff can close a cash transaction, but they can't process a credit card. It needs manager authorization for that. So you can set up security levels on a per method of payment basis. Underneath that, percent employee tip surcharge, 3 equals 3%. Now, What this pertains to is charge tips. Now again, I don't want to get too deep into credit auth right now, but here's the way it works in reality, is that when I process a credit card transaction with the credit service, there's actually a surcharge. This is how the credit service makes its money. And they charge X number of percent for the amount of money that they process through. So if I have a $100 transaction and they charge 3%, for example, as a surcharge for processing that credit card transaction, then that means out of that $100 transaction, 30 cents will be deducted, or 30 cents will be charged for them to process that $100 transaction. It's not great, but that's the way business works. And that's fine in itself. But the thing is, on that $100 transaction, I also have my $10 tip. Now, the $10 tip now increases that pay, or that surcharge, from 30 cents up to 3 cents. We'll say 33 cents. So basically 3 cents of that would be the 3% of the $10 would then be also charged on top of that to pay for the charged transaction. Now what you can do is within here, you can actually say, you know what, if I'm going to pay my surcharge for my revenue, you're going to pay your surcharge for your charge tip. And so what the system will do will then, it will then calculate out that the 3% when you apply the charge tip, that 3% will be deducted from that charge tip to pay for your surcharge for that charge transaction. It may seem kind of petty because, okay, well, that's what, 3 cents, you know, for that charge transaction. Well, yeah, that's 3 cents for that one charge transaction. Multiply that by all of your staff every day, every transaction they do, or charge transaction they do. And over a period of time, that's a lot of money that you would be absorbing if you were not actually charging that surcharge for the charge tips to your employees. So the restaurant will pay its surcharge, but the employees getting their charge tips will also pay their surcharge. And this is where you program that in. This information will be reflected across within the employee cash out report and also be available for viewing within the tender balance screen when that comes up. Coming down below that, we have, actually let's go over to the left again, we have select. And in here we have all of our methods of authorization that can be applied within the system. Now PixelPoint will work with integrated credit authorization. It will also work with external credit card authorization as well. If it's an external system where I've got a little box, I've rented it from the bank, and I swipe my cards through there and it goes through the credit service and so on, then when it comes to applying charge tips on the system, all you have to do is, as I had mentioned in a previous session, just over tender it. So if it's a $100 credit card transaction with a $10 tip, then in the PixelPoint system I would not have it set up for credit card authorization because that's done externally, but I would over tender it so that it would be $110 for the credit card transaction, and then the $10 would be reflected as change because it just basically treats it like cash, and it would be with the understanding when the reports generate out that $10 change on that credit card transaction would be the charge tip. But if you are using the integrated credit authorization, which most people do, then you can determine which one of these little checkboxes you want to use on a per method of payment basis. Now the first one here is no authorization. Cash is cash, I'll take it. So there's no authorization required for that. The next one down here is member VIP authorization. Now if you select on this, what's going to happen is that this method of payment will actually look to the contents of the member database table within PixelPoint. And it will look for the member swipe card number or the member name or the member phone number, something like that, to retrieve the member record. And then there may be something in there identifying, well, it's a prepaid balance because there's a gift card, or this customer has, for example, a credit, a house credit, so they're allowed to charge to that account, and then we'll bill them and they can pay back later on, things like that. So anything of that nature reflecting within where you're applying a member to the transaction, or then that method of payment will look to that database based on that little checkbox. The next one down here is credit card authorization. If you check on this, then the transaction is going to look for a credit card swipe number and also the expiry date as well. And then from there it will branch out to the credit card verification system to look for further authorization. The next one down is front desk authorization. So within this may be for things like a room charge, if I program in a method of payment called room charge, in which case then it will interface with a PMS or property management system. It'll look for a folio number, in this case, to match that up to see if you can charge it across to their room. The next thing we have here is debit cards. So within this, once again, it'll look for the swipe number, but also a PIN number in this case. Next one down is custom. If there's any form of custom authorization that may be required for any method of payment anywhere in the world, then you can actually program that into the system and use credit or a custom authorization, in which case then it will use whatever criteria is defined for that. The next one down is gift card third party. Now, do not confuse this with the integrated gift card system within PixelPoint. That one looks to the member record. This one looks to an external third-party system. For example, the Mercury gift card system. This is an external third-party software, and if that is the case, this will then interface with that to look externally for that authorization. And then also for just general external authorizations for anything beyond the Mercury gift card system or anything beyond whatever might be customized for any form of authorization. There's also external authorization as well. You select on this and it will look externally for any form of authorization, and more often than not you would have to manually punch in an approval number for that before it processes through. In most cases what you're going to use is no authorization, member, and credit card in most cases. If they use debit card would be in there as well, and if you're interfacing with anything pertaining to motels and hotels, then there may be use for front desk. So those are the most common ones there. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have payment options. First thing here, sale auth, no pre-auth. By now you should know what this is. This means that if I select this method of payment, any form of charge tipping will not be required for it. So you can actually have, for example, two visas programmed into the system. One that requires tipping, one that does not, for example. And you could have one set up with this checked and the other set up with it unchecked. The next thing down is disable cash drawer from opening. So if I select on this method of payment, then do I want the cash drawer to open or not? If you're familiar with cash drawers, most cash drawers now have a little slot in the front, and what that slot does is actually a slot that allows access for you to slide slips of paper into that slot, and that slot feeds underneath the cash tray, the cash drawer insert. And so that's where you would stick, for example, all of your credit card slips. So if you don't want the cash drawer to open when you're doing a credit card transaction, then you can select on this, in which case then the drawer will not open when you're processing across to a Visa or a MasterCard or something like that. Allow retip. Depending on the credit card verification system that you're using and the credit service, if they allow for retipping, then you can select on this, in which case then if I accidentally put in $200 for my $20 tip and I need to fix that before we settle the charges at the end of the day, then if the credit service allows for that, then you can actually select on this, in which case then I can go back in and I can reapply that charge tip to that transaction to correct it. The next one down is force tender settlement, and related to that is show calculated tender amount. Now, force tender settlement, this all pertains to tender balancing. I kind of mentioned that in a couple of areas earlier on, and so in here on a per method of payment basis, you can identify which ones you want to identify for tender settlement. Now, and I've got it set up right now for tender settlement based on cash out. So if I do a cash transaction and maybe some credit cards, and I have them all checked with force tender settlement, then when I do my employee cash out, then I will actually have a screen that will show up that will say, I need you to enter in what you've got for cash, Visa, MasterCard, for example. In which case then I have to count all this stuff out. I put it into the system, and then it tells me if I'm over or short and whether I need to, recount it or I need to account for the missing $20 bill or something like that. And so if you do not have these checked, which by default they are not checked, then the system will just continue on with the cash out without requiring tender balancing. But if you do want to invoke that, you select on that, and this whole new screen will show up. And I'll explain more about that as we get further into the training. Now, the show calculated tender amount, this will determine whether it's going to be a blind tender balance or one that actually shows what you should have. For this situation, if I have a bunch of bartenders, for example, and they're counting out their cash, for example, as part of their cash out process. If I uncheck show calculated tender amount, then they will not know when they're counting that how much that they should have in there. And so when they submit to me their cash out report and their cash, then they'll say, this is what it is, and it shows here that I'm $20 over. So you know, I'll have that done, and or if they're short, then you know, I need that $20 or something like that. Now, if you put in show calculated tender amount, then that is with the understanding they're going in and they're going to make sure that things balance up as best as they can. There's an upside to that, and that will make sure that more often than not that the balances coming in will match up with what the system shows. On the downside, sure enough, if an employee finds out, hey, I'm over by $15, then they will make it balance by pocketing the $15, and so now everything shows as exactly as it is, but the establishment said the $15 for whatever reason that happened. So it's up to the establishment to determine whether they want to show those amounts or not. Now underneath this we have this grayed out box. The reason why it's grayed out is because it's assumed with cash, but I'm going to select on another method of payment here so we can see this. Is bank deposit item non-EFT? Now this all has to do with cash management. Cash management is basically the inventory of cash. Think of it that way. PixelPoint has the ability that you can actually monitor, for example, the contents of money going into a safe or several safes. If you've got cash drawer inserts and you have those cash drawer inserts all loaded up with their floats and ready to go, and they're in their own safes. You're also dealing with petty cash as well. You're also making bank deposits and sending money off to the bank. This is all part of the cash management system in PixelPoint. And in here, this is related to that in that we have is bank deposit item non-EFT. So this is an item, whatever this method of payment happens to be. If you check on it, that means that this method of payment will be included within your bank deposits. Now, it's also flagged here as non-EFT, electronic funds transfer. That's what EFT stands for. Now, Visa, for example, is a credit card, okay, and the funds are transferred electronically, okay, electronic funds transfer. So in this case, you do not need to take your Visa slips to the bank because you've already got them deposited electronically, the same with any other form of credit. But if you take personal checks, for example, that would be something that you would include within a bank deposit. Or if you take food stamps, for example, or food vouchers, then those are things that are regarded kind of like as money, and there are new methods of payment that are set up within the system, and you do need to take them to the bank and deposit them that way. So if that is the case, you can identify them within here that those are bank deposit items, and the system will require that, you know, if you've done any forms of transaction this way, then they should be accountable within your bank deposits as well, and they will be reflected within the cash management system. Also, we have ask for cash back as well. So within here, if you are set up with a credit card verification system that does allow for cash back processing as well, then when you do process through things such as on credit or within debit, then you can include within here ask for cash back, in which case then that extra little flag will be included in there, in which case then you can provide change to the customer based on their credit transaction. Coming down below that, we have card prefixes. Within card prefixes, when it comes to selecting on the method of payment, okay, so if I have a Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and if I swipe the card through the station on the finish screen, then the system will recognize what kind of card it is based on the prefix or the first several numbers within that card number. Now you'll see, for example, if the swipe card number begins with a 4, the system will recognize it as a Visa. You don't have to select Visa and then swipe the card, or swipe the card and then select Visa. It will just recognize it, and it'll save you a keystroke. Same goes here to MasterCard. Take a look at here. If it begins with a 51, 2, 3, 4, or 5, then the system will know it's a MasterCard. Okay, so that's basically what all these prefixes does, is that it will use card swipe recognition based on the prefix. Coming over to advanced, we have advanced settings on method of payment. The first thing here is accounting code and then tip accounting code. These are general ledger account numbers strictly for reporting purposes only, so you can put within here whatever the GL account numbers would be for those. Underneath that, we have custom DLL. So depending on where you are and what you're programming into the system, if there is a custom DLL, dynamic link library file, that needs to be applied in order to process this particular method of payment with whatever form of authorization is required, then you can apply that within there. Most cases, you won't have to do it. It's pretty rare that we come across anything like that, but we do have that capability in there. Cash change processing. Now this is an interesting little thing here. This is for situations where we actually designed this originally for the UK, and there are other areas, parts of the world that are actually doing this as well, where you have government-issued vouchers, food vouchers. And within these, what you do is you take your food voucher, let's say for, all right, I'll speak in North American terms here. Let's say I've got a government food voucher for $15, and I can take this to a restaurant, and I can use this as money, okay? And in here, I order a meal. Now, the meal comes to $14.50. I got 50 cents left over. Now, the way these government vouchers typically work is that they do not provide for change. If they did, then some people will just go buy a pack of gum and then give me the change. And they don't want that. What they want them to do is use them, you know, for meals and so on like that. And so, with that being said, what the system will do is if I do actually present a $15 government voucher and it comes to $14.50, rather than provide change, it says here the system displays and prints $0 change and the house keeps the change, being the 50 cents. Okay, so that's the way it works. If it goes over the $15, then you pay whatever is above and beyond that. But if it's less than the $15, you're only going to get, you know, the $14.50 worth, and that's it. So that's what all this pertains to here, is just how to handle the processing of change for things of that nature. Okay, next one down here is print customer authorization slip with transaction receipt. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory here. So the customer authorization slip is the credit card authorization slip, and print that at the same time as the transaction receipt. So basically, rather than have two separate print jobs going at the same time, you're actually having the receipt print off with the credit card slips at the same time. It just kind of saves that. It is just double hit process. So this way, you know, if they're going to pay for it on MasterCard, then here's your two charge slips, and along with this, we've auto-printed the receipt as well, all at the same time. Print customer authorization slip with the transaction receipt. So if you, sorry, I messed up on myself here. So that's what that does. But also within this as well, also when receipt is reprinted as well. Now, if, for example, when I'm doing printing of these things, if I do a reprint of any kind of receipt, it will actually show up with on there reprint. Okay, this is a security feature for the system, so that will identify that this is, you know, it's already been printed once. I'm printing it again. Now, if there was a mess up with the paper, it got jammed, or the printer had a problem, or whatever the case, if you have to reprint the receipt, then it will also reprint the slips as well. Now, also on this as well, we have minimum value and maximum value on this as well. So on here, what you can do is on a per method of payment basis, not so much for cash, of course, but for other things, you can actually set in allowable minimum and maximum values that can be applied within the check as well when applying this method of payment. And if it's too small, then it will not accept that. So for example, I buy a pack of gum, it's 50 cents, here's my Visa, you know, then you may say, well, no, we're not going to do that because that's silly, and you know, you got to purchase something a little bit more. The charge you know, the surcharge on that will be more than what the amount of the thing is anyway. So you can actually set up minimums and maximums on this as well. Coming over to the right-hand side, we have always print on receipt. All right, now what this means is that this method of payment will always print on the check when you print it off. Situations you would use this is where you commonly use foreign methods of payment. Okay, let me just kind of close on that. I'll go to foreign currency. There, foreign currency. This would be a typical example of this, where if I have, let's say, I'm an American restaurant, but I accept Canadian currency, or vice versa. Then what you can do is within this foreign currency of, let's say, Canadian or American, whatever happens to be, I have always print on receipt. So when it prints off, it'll show you, here's the contents of your check, here's everything that you ordered, here's how much you owe. That O is with the assumption of being base currency. But if we also accept, let's say, Canadian currency or American currency, then that method of payment, if you have that checked for that, will also show up on the check, and whatever the exchange rate value is for that. So this way, you know, if you can accept one method of payment or another, they'll both show up on the check all the time. Do not ask for swipe. This is for situations where you may be working with handhelds, for example. And on the handheld, I don't have a swipe card on it. I need to put in a manual entry number. So if that is the case, I can actually override the system where it asks on this particular method of payment where it's requiring a swipe. I can check on this, in which case then I would manually punch that in using the little tiny touch screen because you're working on a PDA. Do not ask for expiry date on this as well. There may be situations where you want to override this, or depending on if you're using custom authorization for the system, if you want to override either of these pertaining to the swipe and the expiry date on a credit card, then you can actually check on this and it will actually override that. Print credit card number format. Now, when it comes to printing out the formats for that, if you are using a system called ValueLink, this is one of our forms of credit card authorization system, working with the First Data Credit Service. It's a very popular one. Then you can actually dictate which format you want to use. There's the conventional one is where it only shows the last 4 digits, but it doesn't show everything before that for the credit card number. But the masking, you can actually reverse that within the First Data system, in which case then it will mask out the last 4, but it will show you everything before that. So you can go one way or the other in that particular circumstance. Payment denominations. This all has to do with the cash management system, as I had mentioned earlier on. And within here, you can actually program in, here I'm going to jump up to cash for a moment here, cash, payment denominations. In here, you can actually program in the individual denominations that you accept within the establishment. So this way, when you're going through and counting your tender balance, for example, not only will you say, I've got $500.23 in cash in my till, but you can also say I've got this many 50s, this many 20s, this many 10s, 5s, 1s, and so on like that. And you can program in all of these within this tab here. And this will work in conjunction with the cash management system to make sure that all of the specific denominations are accounted for in here, so you can make sure you've got enough 20s and 50s and 10s and 5s, enough change within the establishment to make further change and so on. Okay? I could go into more about that, but that's pretty self-explanatory. I think for what we've got today, that pretty well covers it. So we've got just a few minutes right now. My apologies for going a little bit over time, but I did want to kind of finish all that off. So within here today, we've briefly covered through as far as we finished off system setup. We went through station setup, revenue center, sale type, POS functions, and payment method setup. So we covered off a fair bit. We're doing pretty good. So Leslie, I'm going to open up for questions now. We've got a couple of minutes here. And if anyone has any questions, by all means, go right ahead.
Yes, if anyone has a question, if you can type your question in the panel box, and I'll go ahead and read them off as they come into the queue. We did have a question that came in earlier. Michael is asking, to edit the end-of-day report, I've been told it's a collaboration of different reports. How do we find out what section is what report to edit in Crystal reports?
Okay, okay, that's a bit of a complex one. First of all, in terms of editing the end-of-day report within Crystal, I would not recommend even attempting that. The reason being is that that particular report has its own separate DLL that ties into that as well. If you go about trying to compromise the contents of that, you're going to run into all kinds of problems and probably have a corrupt report as a result. But to get a better idea in terms of what kind of information shows up into it and how you can manipulate it a little bit better that way is going to something like Data Miner, for example, and take a look at what we've got within there, or maybe within the report viewer system and take a look at the associated report within that. Now the back office equivalent for that is, oh man, I just went blank. I went blank on that. It's so common too. Hang on here, report viewer. All right, sales. Summary. Let me get in here. Summary. End of day. No, it's. You know, I'm sure there's 5 of you shouting at me right now, telling me not to be such an idiot. End of day reports. End of day credit. Oh. Tax summary. I just had a total brain burp on this, so I apologize for this. But in here, there is a back office end-of-day report. And I've said it a 1,000 times within my career, and you think I could remember it right now, and I don't. But anyway, there's a back office report that offers it's the granddaddy of all reports. And in there, it's got about a dozen reports that are all broken down into their separate things, and then all kind of batched into this one big report. So that's how that's all handled. In terms of being able to, using Crystal to edit that one specific report, I would not recommend it because, as I said, it's got its own separate DLL, and it was very carefully structured. If you do want to elaborate on it, though, what I would recommend is go into System Setup and go into POS Reports. And within here, here we've got the end-of-day summary. So on this, if you want to add in additional ones, just click on Add Report, go to the appropriate directory. I keep going to this stupid one for some reason. But go to the appropriate one, and then just tag in the additional information you want within there, but leave the rest of it as it is. Anything else?
I don't have any further questions in the queue at this time.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I think we're doing pretty good. You know, this stuff was pretty self-explanatory. There was a lot to kind of cram in, and I know that I talk pretty fast to try and push it all through, but, you know, I mean, like we're in session 4 now, and we've got still a fair bit to carry across, you know, so there's a lot of content. It's not really complicated stuff. It's just a matter of fitting it all in because everything does something. So, you know, that's why we're doing it. But we're doing pretty good with it. As far as our schedule goes, so far we're all on schedule as well. So things are flying through pretty good. And I hope within the next 4 or 5 sessions we should have all of the back office stuff done, and then we can start hitting on specific things. I'm going to skip over the odd topic like inventory or you know, reports or something like that, and I will hit them as their own separate topics later on, as opposed to try and, you know, disrupt the flow of everything within back office by covering a complex topic. So we will be covering everything. It's just in their own little area. I'll allocate those out with their own separate sessions at some time or another. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention, and I'll see you tomorrow. We're same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay, so thank you very much, and have a good day.